All right, well, hey class, welcome back. Welcome to week 2. Great to see you all. Excited to dive in and talk a little bit about last week, week 1. We'll debrief, and then also we'll talk about this week and things coming up. All right, so let's talk briefly about week 1 and debrief the things that we saw there. We got introduced to our first textbook, Design to Lead, Geiger and Peck. Great book, excellent book. Hopefully you noticed that the book is actually designed a little bit to teach you and I as leaders that we have a role in creating more leaders. But hopefully you grasp that that's also an important way for us to learn and grow ourselves as leaders. So even though the book is teaching us a lot about how to make more leaders, it's a great chance for us to learn and develop ourselves as leaders, and then hopefully you catch that vision as well as about how we can develop others into roles of leadership. The conviction, culture, construct paradigm, super important, super valuable way, I think, to think about different aspects of church and of our leadership. So it starts with conviction, it moves out to culture, and then eventually constructs the outer layer in the paradigm there. So in week 1, we scratched the surface of some core convictions. And again, that's something you're going to talk about more and more throughout your seminary track, in your Bible and your theology courses. Hopefully something you're already developing a deep conviction for God's Word, for its truth, for God's design for the church. So convictions at the center, and yet something we're only going to get to scratch the surface of during this course, because we're going to move on and begin to talk more about culture and especially about constructs. So this week, talking about visionary leadership, we're going to move from more convictions into more culture kind of stuff, and then the rest of the course actually will be spent more and more on some of the systems and practices that we do as leaders to develop and help the church grow and function and thrive. So that's just one way to maybe look at it. We'll move back and forth, of course, across convictions, culture, and constructs, but that's maybe one way to view the rest of our time in the course. Also want to say that great that you got the chance to engage with John Maxwell, one of the OG leadership gurus, talking about leadership as influence, just an important fundamental concept as we think about leadership. So he's a great guy to keep going back to time and again. All right, so that was week 1. As you might have noticed, in the 7-week course, things move quickly. So don't fall behind, stay up with the reading, stay up with the assignments, so we can move week to week, unit to unit, as we're jumping all around into different topics. So this week, week 2, we're talking about visionary leadership, all right? And our overview, again, this is always in the course schedule. I encourage you to review it each week so you know where we're going, where we're headed. But the description this week, students will consider the role of leaders in casting vision and forming the culture that shapes an organization. All right, the outcome, students will be able to evaluate the culture of a church. You're going to spend some time thinking about that, and also to communicate vision that shapes that culture. So you see the interplay there between vision and culture, important relationship. So some of our objectives: evaluate the culture of a church. You'll do that in some of your assignments. Create a roadmap for transforming culture, and cast a vision for a church ministry or project. So that's what your assignments will be covering. I also want to just say, so I'm going to talk primarily here in this lecture just about vision very briefly, because chapter 6 in this book about culture is just, it's gold. It's worth the price of the book. So I just want to give you a chance to be able to read that chapter rather than hear me talk about culture. So read that chapter, focus a lot of time there, and we'll circle back to it next time. But I want to talk a little bit about vision as we get going into week 2. All right, so here we go. I got a handful of points for you. Number 1, what is vision? Well, when I've talked about vision in the past, one of the things that I've said is if you're going on a journey with a group of people, what is the first thing you have to decide? Well, if you want to end up in the same place at the same time together, then the first thing you have to decide is the destination. If you're going to go on a journey and lead them through a journey, a group of people, then you've got to decide on the destination you want to end up at. So if you think of leadership as that, taking people on a journey, then the vision is the destination. Do you see the destination that you're trying to get to? Can you describe it? In the words of Andy Stanley, a vision is a mental picture of what could be, fueled by a conviction that it should be. All right? A picture of what could be, fueled by a conviction that it should be. So you know what you're aiming at, and you're convicted to go and get that thing. So you'll think more about that this week in the readings and in watching the videos, some valuable stuff there as well. All right? Number 2, where does vision come from? Well, first and foremost, it comes from the Lord. I think that's one of the critical things of Christian leadership is that we're not out there creating our own visions for where we think people should go. We're hearing from the Lord, specifically through His Word. What is God's vision for His people? What is God's design for the church? So we can think about that in terms of, theologically, what are some core things that God has designed for the church, for it to follow Him, for it to follow its mission to make more disciples of Jesus, all those kind of things. And then also we can think about specifically some visions that pastors might have for their churches, that leaders might have in their churches for how a certain ministry program might accomplish the bigger picture vision of making disciples. Okay, so there could be smaller visions that fit into the big picture vision of the Great Commission. And so the Bible is going to give us those fundamental visions, God's design for the church. And then also through prayer and through conversations and through study, we're going to come to some of our own visions within that greater vision about how does, kids ministry and student ministry and a men's Bible study and a women's Bible study and an outreach program, how do those things fit within the bigger vision? You might capture a vision for something specific within the bigger picture, all right? One approach that I always recommend for determining vision, and this is just kind of the way I think about it, is I think of problem and solution. All right, well, I often identify a problem first, and then to me, a vision is usually a solution to that problem. So there's a problem. We want to reach our community. Our community needs the gospel. How do we reach them? That's the question or the problem. Then we might come up with a solution, a vision for a certain method or event or way to go about reaching our community. Okay, so there's maybe one approach as you think about vision. One other thing I'll say about that is that some leaders will think of vision as something that they go off by themselves and do. I know some leaders where that has happened, where they've been off by themselves and studying prayer, and the Lord has given them a very specific direction for the next few years or whatever it might be. But I would really encourage you, as you're trying to come up with vision later in your career as a leader, to involve other people. My own experience has been that my visions are a lot stronger when I consult with other people, discuss them with other leaders, say, hey, I've been thinking and praying and studying the Word, and here's an idea I have, a direction I think we maybe should be going. What do you think? What are the pros and cons of that? What are some other options? Discussing with others can be a really valuable piece of determining vision. Number 3, how do I share vision with others? Well, vision is like a leaky bucket, you might hear some people say. You have to constantly be filling it up. You might think as a leader that you've shared the vision and that the people around you should just grab that, hold on to that, and run with it. And yet you'll find that day after day, week after week, that the vision disappears. You have to keep filling it up. You have to continue to share it. So how do I share vision? Well, any way and every way you can, over and over again. Put it at the top of every meeting agenda, state it at the start of each meeting, talk about it on Sundays, work in stories. If you're casting a vision for a small group ministry at the church, then you as the leader need to be leading a small group, and you should be telling stories about small group ministry. As you're preaching the text, even in preaching, vision is a part of that. So, you're preaching through a text, you come to an application of a certain kind, and you might share a story about, hey, in my small group, we were talking about this, or the text tells us we should do this. Here's one way we did this as a small group. You've got to work in components of the vision into the way that you talk on Sundays and every other day that you interact with people, because you've got to keep sharing and filling up that vision. The other thing I'll say is you need to lead with why. There's a great video by Simon Sinek that you'll watch this week that talks about that. People don't give their lives for a what, they give their lives for a why. Right? People don't give their lives for the kids ministry of your church, but they do give their lives to invest in the next generation of followers of Jesus. Right? So they care about the why much more than the what. Okay, so always lead with why. Why are we doing this? What are we accomplishing? It's not that we're just doing kids ministry because that's what churches do. It's that we're investing in the next generation of believers in Jesus Christ. Okay, people will give their time and their energy for that. All right, number 4, how do I create change? We as leaders are change agents. This is something we'll talk about a lot throughout the course. one way to think about it is this. If you're trying to get people from A to B, if A is where they are right now, and B is where they need to be in the future, God's design for them in the future, B is the destination, right? B is the vision that you're seeing. You're saying as a leader, all right, I see where the group of people that I've been called to lead, I can see where they are right now. I can see God's call for them in the future. And that's the vision, okay? A lot of leaders just stop there and they say, well, great, I've got it. That's leadership. I can see where we need to get to. I can maybe even talk about it or describe it a little bit. But actually, I would say the work of leadership is not just seeing B. That's maybe the very lowest level requirement. Actually, leadership is taking people from A to B, from where they are right now to where you believe God is calling them to be. Whether that's growing deeper in their relationship with the Lord, whether that's reaching their community, whatever that specific vision might be, it's taking them from A to B, and that actually takes a lot of strategy, a lot of work. There's a lot involved in leading people from A to B. And so actually the rest of the course, I would say, in large, is answering that question of, all right, I've seen the vision. Okay, now how do I get people from here to there? So we've got to start by talking about vision, and so that's where we're going to start this week. But actually, we'll talk a ton in this course about then the great work of, after you've seen the vision, how do you help people get from here to there? Awesome. Well, hey, have a great week reading, studying, doing your assignments. Feel free to reach out with any questions.